So this is the one that I wanted to go through today. My camera's dead. It's died. So I got to get another one. Hopefully I'll have another one for next week. But meanwhile, this is what's going to be shown. On YouTube. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the Bankster Thieves. This is number 5. This is actually a PowerPoint presentation I put together a couple of years ago, but I never ever presented it anywhere. And I figured this would be a good time to do it, given the current events and everything. And then after that, we can talk about we'll do a separate live stream about the challenge to constitutionality of the minor estate and stuff like that. So anyways, first of all, I'm not a liar. Well, I'm a lawyer. No, I'm a liar. Or a financial advisor. You should never take my word for anything. You should always do your own research. I provided references to aid you in your research, but I don't know everything, and I'm open to any ideas. There's 4 types of people you'll meet in your life. There's the people who try to wake up the slaves. There's the slave masters. There's the people who have no idea they're slaves. And there's the people who like being slaves. Which one are you? Do you really know for sure? Are you who you think you are? If you can see through the illusion, then you are the solution. If the people don't know their basic rights and freedoms, how can they know when or if their rights and freedoms are being infringed? And that's the biggest thing that I see in the courts, because I help people in the courts all the time. Nelson has been helping us in Texas. And it's ignorance. People don't have a clue about what their rights are, and they go and give up their rights all the time. And, anyways, don't get me going. Never forget the men who started this country are marijuana-growing, whiskey-drinking, taxi-evading rebels who let their beds at night shoot at the cops. And if you think about it, that's exactly what it was. The militias actually started the War of Independence, okay? They were hunting down the British and blowing their brains out. That's what they were doing. Anyways, so all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. Government's not reason, it's not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it's a dangerous servant and a fearful master. I don't trust the government. I don't trust the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. I don't trust the military-industrial complex. I don't trust the mainstream media. I don't trust the bankster criminal cabal that owns the government, owns the medical, pharmaceutical, industrial complex, owns the mainstream media, owns the military-industrial complex, and owns the mainstream media. And if you call me a conspiracy theorist, I don't trust you. So I don't know how much you know how the banks work, but when you deposit money into a bank account, the money belongs to the bank. You just give it to the bank. And you have a contract to get it back. And bank deposits are unsecured debts to the bank. You got to understand that. So you're loaning the bank money. And did you get their credit rating? People don't think about that stuff, but that's exactly how it works. When you deposit money in the bank, you just loan money to the bank, and it's an unsecured loan.
I actually had a conversation when I was dealing in my bank back up in Canada, and one of the supervisors I was talking to, the customer service, she had great delight in telling me that it wasn't my money.
Yeah,
because I mentioned that comment during part of the conversation, and I already knew that it wasn't. But she corrected me and said, it's not your money. And I said, you're quite correct. When I put it in that bank, it became yours.
That's right.
She was expecting an argument from me, and I agreed, and that deflated her right at that point.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was fun to do.
No doubt, yeah.
It proved that it's true, though.
And then there's the collateralized debt obligations. Mortgages are bundled into a security, and they take priority over the unsecured debt. So they go, and that's what the whole 2008 subprime crisis was all about, is they had circulated all these collateralized debt obligations, and they take priority over any unsecured debt.
The biggest problem with that was they bundled AAA rated to like triple B rated or all together,
and junk
and junk too. But then when the foreclosures started happening, they couldn't separate, and the biggest problem was they couldn't figure out who owned what with these foreclosed homes that were going on.
Oh, there was all sorts of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But anyways, were the cause of the so-called subprime crisis. When you deposit, you're loaning them money. Did you get their credit score? So I have exclusive content available on HowTube. It's $9.99 a month for videos plus unlimited email consultations, but I'm not a liar. Well, I'm an attorney. No, I'm a liar. But I can tell you what I would do under certain circumstances and where to find the forms. The only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and just deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. I need people being on point. Some of my exclusive content is Arlington Private Information Share, Land Deed Training. I've got that Arlington Private Information Share is about 7 videos. Land Deed Training, I've got about 3 videos there. I think there's 3. Estoppel Certificates Training, Foreclosure Estoppel Certificates Training, Corporate Denial Training, Toll Roads Notice and Demand Training, Invoice Training, Notice of Void Judgment Training, Revocation of Signature Training, Third Party Witness Training, Federal Habeas Corpus Training. And Nelson was saying yesterday how it's because I have in the North Texas Toll Road Authority, they have a whole bunch of toll roads, and I just go on them with impunity, and they never send me a bill or anything because I set it up so that they don't want to talk to me. I used to get a bill, and they quit sending me bills. Anyways, so they used to send me threat letters, calling me habitual violators, and making threats, and I nipped that in the bud, and then I used the Form 1020, and then when I completed the process, I filed a bar grievance against their chief counsel, and everything stopped when that happened. Anyways, so some other exclusive content is revocation of voter registration, criminal complaint training. I got about 3 videos on that. I probably need to do some more. Lawsuit training, I got 1 video on that. I probably need to do some more. Other training requests, I'm open to ideas, but it's got to be something that is within the scope of my channel and that I haven't already done. And I've got over 600 videos. So there's most of the stuff is public. And I just the exclusive stuff is stuff that's, because I want to educate people. And so I make most of it public, but there's some of the stuff that's exclusive that is training and babysitting, basically. Anyways, Northeast Private Information Shares, some of those videos are up. This one's actually going to go public. It's a live stream right now. Let's take a look here and see if anybody showed up at the live stream. Not yet. Well, actually, a couple chats. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. 13 viewers. Okay, good. Petition for a writ of mandamus. I probably need to do that one. I need to do that. I haven't done it yet. And the video's taken down by YouTube. YouTube has taken down a bunch of my videos. And I was talking about it earlier. YouTube actually took my channel down twice. The first time, they didn't take any of my videos down. They just took my channel down. The second time, they took down 4 of my videos, gave me 3 strikes, and took my channel down. And so what they say is they normally give you 3 strikes, and then they take your channel down. Anyways, so what happened is both times I responded the same way. I said, they send you an email, and they say you can respond to this email or a link. So you go on a website, actually, to give them your response. Anyways, both times I responded the same way. I told them, you're engaged in multiple felonies. You're violating my rights under the color of law. That's a felony. You're conspiring to threaten, coerce, injure, intimidate me in the free exercise of my rights. That's another felony. You're subjecting me to your Satanism with your sorcery, forced medical, your sorcery, your pharmaceuticals, peddling your pharmaceuticals, that's sorcery, and your necromancy, and there's a bunch of things, and you're engaged in war crimes with your forced medical experiment, taking reprisals against me for my political beliefs. I'm going to sue your butt off. All your executive officers and board of directors are personally liable in their private capacity. Don't think I don't know what to do, because I've been to the U.S. Supreme Court 5 times. You're next. And 15 minutes later, my channel's back up. And so what happened after the second time they did it, I actually filed criminal complaints against every member of the board of directors of Google, Alphabet, which owns Google, and I sent them to the FBI. And what happened is they fired the CEO of YouTube. Okay, now I don't know if they fired her. I just know that she suddenly resigned. Eh?
Yeah.
and it doesn't appear to have changed. So I'm still going to sue them anyways. But anyways, so they know what's coming. I'll probably sue them for about, who knows how much I'm missing. With the shadow banning, and they demonetized a bunch of my videos, and some of my videos I've got over 100,000 hits, and they demonetized some of those, and so anyways,
it shows about 560 or 600 on the counter, though.
Sorry?
On the counter, the public counter that you can see is
right
views.
Right.
There's like 500 or 600 views.
Yeah. Yeah.
On 100,000 that you can see on the back end, of course.
Well, it's some of the videos. Some of the videos have 100,000 hits. Some of them have been up. Like there's one called Void Judgments. That one's got over 100,000 hits. But that one's been up since 2014. And it's been up, but they also demonetized it. So anyways, so the videos taken down by YouTube will be up there. And first view of all new uploads will be up there. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free, linked on my videos and on my website, okay? And if anybody wants to know where my website is, let me show you where it is. This is my website. Let's put it on YouTube. Okay. So this is my website. So for anybody that's interested, this is the front page of my website. The free videos right here, these are links to YouTube videos. They're hard to find on YouTube. So, and they're organized by different topics. So they're not all linked here, but most of them are. And there's links based on topics, and the recent ones aren't linked on there. So, but the recent ones are going to be recent in my channel. So you'll see them. They'll be easy to find. They'll be recent. But I've got over 600 videos too. But anyway, so this is my website. This is the free videos page. And they're organized by different topics, so you can find them that way. They're hard to find on YouTube, and that's why I did this. And then also there's free files. Those are files. I got 2 groups. They're both called Administrating Your Public Servants. One is on Google Groups, and the other one used to be on Yahoo Groups. Yahoo took down all our groups. So those free files, a lot of them are in here. And what I do also is I convert all of these videos that I do into a PDF file, so you'll have a PDF of all of the court citations and stuff like that, and you can find the video, the PDF. So this, like you see all these videos, Citizenship State, that's one of the videos. That's a PDF of it, so you can go through there and find the court citations and do your own research. And then there's also some forms right here. Affidavit, no social security number, some generic forms. Somebody contacted me yesterday about the Harris County Toll Road Authority. That's right here. That's when I sent them a notice and demand. Anyways, so these are all free forms that are available. Some of them are PDFs of the videos, and some of them are Word files. Now, what you do, and also in the videos that are linked below, people contact me, want access to it. I don't give you access, okay? What you do is you download the video onto your hard drive, and then you can save it as something and manipulate it and have it for yourself, okay? You don't need access to do that. And so that's all you do. I'm not going to give people access to manipulate it on, because I've got them uploaded to Google Docs, and I don't give access, period. So anyways, so that's my website. And then there's also the HowTube subscription channel. But so let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. And we'll continue from there. All exclusive content will be on HowTube, and you can buy a subscription there. And that's my HowTube Sovereignty International. Thomas Jefferson, the debate over the recharter of the bank bill. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow the private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that grow up around the banks, will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Notice all the homeless people nowadays. If all bank loans were paid, no one would have a bank deposit. There would not be a dollar of currency or coin in circulation. Think about that. This is a staggering thought. We are completely dependent on the commercial banks. Someone has to borrow every dollar we have into circulation, cash or credit. If the banks create ample synthetic money, we're prosperous. If not, we starve. We are absolutely without a permanent monetary system. When one gets a complete grasp upon the picture, the tragic absurdity of our hopeless position is almost incredible. But there it is. The banking problem, is the most important subject intelligent persons can investigate and reflect upon. It is so important that our present civilization may collapse unless it is widely understood and the defects remedied very soon. And I think cryptocurrencies is the remedy. That's Robert H. Hemphill, credit manager of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta for 8 years. So anybody would know, he would know. The American Revolution was primarily fought over King George III's Currency Act. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. This is George III, Chapter 12, 1778, 2 years after the Declaration of Independence. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising a revenue in His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no shit, Batman. That from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, or assessment whatever payable in any of the colonies, provinces, or plantations in North America or the West Indies, except only such duties as it may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. My new book is now available, Trump, a True American Patriot or Not. Mike Blackwell asked me to write the book, and it took me about 6 weeks. And then Mike actually hired a company. He babysat me through the process of getting ready to publish. There's the letter right there from Donald Trump that I sent him a copy if anybody wants to look at it. He hired a company to help us with the publishing, and they wrote, this is on the back of the book, and I think it kind of nails it really well. It says, in Trump, a True American Patriot or Not, Glenn Fern and Mike Blackwell reveal the depths of corruption, deceit, and manipulation infesting our political system for hundreds of years, regardless of political affiliation. Read the hard evidence that exposes how our elected officials sold Americans into slavery. Understand the Founding Fathers' true intent when they formed our Republican form of government. Discover the influence of the satanic Roman cult on our politicians and political system. Does Donald Trump want to transfer power back to we the people? In Trump, you will see the great battle that is upon us. And I think they nailed it there pretty good. Anyways, you can order the book from Amazon.com or from my website. It's $40 plus shipping. I prefer you order from my website. If you want to have an autograph book, you have to order from my website. Do you want to know the origins of the deep state? Who's behind it? Do you want to know why it's called the Trump administration? Do you want to know what an administration is? Do you want to know how Trump came to be president? He was invited. Do you want to know who owns Congress? Yes, Congress is owned. It's a private company.
Question, was that true at the beginning or did that happen later?
Well, that with the 1871 corporation.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to know? That's why I'm doing that challenge to constitutionality of the 1871 corporation and the minor estate and the National Bar Foundation.
You can take them all out in one stroke, aren't you?
Well, hopefully. I guess we'll see. All I need is one to have a home run anyways.
I understand. One takes the rest out.
Well, it's what happens is they'll be walking on eggshells after that. Even if the bar isn't taken down, if I send a bar grievance in, they're going to be walking on eggshells. They know I sued them and took them to the Supreme Court, and I can do it again. And so they'll take those bar grievances. They won't sit there and dismiss it as an inquiry. Anyways, don't get me going. You want to know why they're called law enforcement officers? Law enforcement officers are in the Law of War manual. That's the Law of War manual. And what happened is in 1863, I think, it was Lincoln asked Francis Lieber to write the Law of War for the U.S. Army, and that's called the Lieber Code. And Francis Lieber was a law professor at Harvard, and so that Lieber Code has never been repealed or modified. Well, actually, I guess you could say it's been modified. It's been added to because it's in there. And they've added a lot of stuff to it since, with treaties and agreements. The Hague Convention there's 4 Hague Conventions. There's the Law of War, Geneva Conventions. There's 4 Geneva Conventions. There's of 1945. There's the Hague Convention. There's a bunch of different things that they've agreed about with how to conduct warfare. Anyways. Do you want to know how you have become a slave? And think about it. If you're forced to work for the government for nothing, that's slavery. And so anybody that pays taxes, Cliff High was talking about that earlier. Okay, you're enslaved. Anyways, do you want to know what the root cause of the War of Independence was? It's the same thing that's going on now. Exactly the same thing. It's in the book. Do you want to know why every president goes to visit the Pope on their first international trip? Have you noticed that? Trump actually hasn't gone on an international trip as far as I know. But I've got a picture of that, of when he did here. Okay, Mike Blackwell already told him. Jerome Corsi is a guy that lives up in the Northeast. He's written a bunch of books. He's got a website, a YouTube channel. He's got a PhD in political science from Harvard. He's a pretty smart guy. Anyways, he said that in 2015, there's a YouTube video where he says that in 2015, 5 generals came to see him, and they said they were going to overthrow Obama. And he said, well, you can do that if you want, but you might want to go talk to Donald Trump first. And so now this book is then 3 months later, he gets a phone call. They decided not to overthrow Obama because Donald Trump had agreed to run for president. So they went and talked to him. And he says that 107 actually talks about it, how Trump was invited too. And I guess there's about 200 generals that have invited him and are behind him, basically. So at least there's 200 honorable generals that believe in their oath of office, Anyways, so this book is 95% provable facts, some opinion. What I did is I took a court case and manipulated it and turned it into the book. And so It's got lots of court cases, law dictionary definitions, international treaties to prove everything that's in there. But there is a little bit of opinion. And when I do talk about the opinion, I talk about that too. Howard Hughes, one of the things I talk about in the book is that how I think that all billionaires get approached by the deep state and get told you're going to go along with our program or you're going to turn up dead. Since then, I learned that, and this is where David Wilcock comes in, there's a David Wilcock video that talks about how Howard Hughes got blackballed after World War II. He was a big industrialist. He had Hughes Airlines. He was making airplanes for the Defense Department. And after the World War II, he couldn't get any defense contracts, and so he got some young ladies to go and sleep with the military-industrial complex types to find out, why he wasn't able to get any defense contracts, and that's when he found out that they're planning on doing what they're doing, okay, with the fake pandemic, and they want to kill off about 90% of us, the Georgia Guidestone stuff, right? Anyways, and so Howard Hughes actually had a bunch of some manuals set up on how to defeat the whole thing. And what happened is Kennedy was actually implementing that. Remember, Kennedy circulated $6 billion worth of U.S. Treasury notes. I've got a couple of them in my briefcase. And so does anybody want to see them? I can go get them if you want to see one.
Yes.
That'd be cool.
Okay, I'll go get them. But so Kennedy circulated $6 billion worth of U.S. Treasury notes, and that was the first thing that Johnson did when after Kennedy was killed. Is Johnson recalled all of them, but they didn't all get returned. That's why I've got a couple of them. And then again, it goes to also the helicopter crash in 1984. There was Donald Trump. That's why I think that Donald Trump knows exactly. Matter of fact, they say 107 says that Trump is Nixon's message in a bottle to the deep state, because Nixon basically got set up, and so he basically was close to Trump for many years after he left office. And he told Trump all the little secrets and the things that the tricks that they like to play. Anyways, let me go and get that those treasury notes. They're treasury notes is what they are.
So, Carl, how do you feel about your homeland being ruined? Does it matter to you?
Not really. I left England nearly 25 years ago now. But I knew when I retired from the police.
So what I have here is
how bad things were going to
a
get.
treasury note and a silver certificate. You want to pass them around. Notice the treasury note's got red ink on it. That's lawful de jure.
So what's different about these?
Well, it says the treasury note says U.S. United States Treasury note. And the silver certificate, it doesn't say Federal Reserve note. It says United States Treasury note. And the other one says silver certificate. It says right on it. And it says the silver certificate says there is a deposit in the Treasury, $1 in silver.
Together, compare them one after the other. That way everybody can compare.
Well, there's two of them.
Yeah,
So I already gave him two.
Two copies.
They're not copies, they're originals.
United States note.
Yeah. So anyways, so there was a helicopter crash in 1984 with that Trump was supposed to have been on. There was 3 of his executives were killed. That was I guess it was in Atlantic City, or they were going to Atlantic City or something like that. And 3 of his executives got killed. And but Trump canceled out at the last minute. Now, I happen to know a little bit about helicopters. I started working on helicopters as a mechanic in 1976. And so I know a little bit about helicopters and how they work. And what happened is I've never heard of a helicopter crashing for the reasons that those ones crashed, or that one crashed. The stuff that I read said that the blades came off, and that is unheard of. They do all sorts of things to make sure those blades don't come off. So it sounds like it was sabotage to me. Anyways, yeah, the helicopters crash for a lot of reasons. A lot of times, like you have a main rotor and a tail rotor, and one of the bearings in the tail rotor dry shaft will seize up. Matter of fact, they put on those bearings, they put temperature sensitive paint on them, because as a mechanic, that was our job. We had to check those things and make sure that paint wasn't discolored, because if it was, then that airplane couldn't go flying. We had to replace that bearing, and that kind of thing. And yeah, that was something that we had to check all the time. I've never heard of a helicopter crashing because the blades came off, and that would definitely be fatal. In reality, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. And that's true. And thank you, Donald Trump. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property, our babies, in a national system designed to keep track of the people that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. And that's Colonel Edward Mandell House in a private meeting with Woodrow Wilson, who was president during 1913 to 1921. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans, and if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this matter, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless, and without any hope for their redemption, we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. That's the 1871 corporation. This is a statement by President Wilson after he passed the Federal Reserve Act, which instituted the fractional reserve system in the United States. I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. He's an idiot, and he ought to be, don't get me going. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled and one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. A government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Copies of these documents can be found on my website and linked under my recent videos. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 160 searchable law dictionaries, and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the Federal Reserve notes, checks, money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. Let me just check the live stream. Good. And see what the questions are. Yes, Superman Kent says that if the money was returned to the bank, we would still owe the interest, which is impossible to pay. In other words, if you think about it, we have a closed little economy here, and there's $10,000, and somebody borrows the $10,000 for a year, then pays it all back. Well, they haven't paid back the interest, and the interest hasn't been created. It creates a recipe for bankruptcies all over the place, and that's what happens.
I used to have a little story that I would tell people in the beginning to explain how that system worked. I told it to Gabby the other day, and it blew her mind because she said, as a 14-year-old, exactly what every other adult says, that all these people have to do is just work. They work, and they'll earn the money to pay the interest back.
Yeah, but that's easier said than...
I know, but the problem is that it's a closed system.
That's right.
They only create 100,000, but want 110,000 back.
That's right.
You can't get that 10,000.
That's right.
Unless you take it from somebody else.
That's
is
right.
Why there are bankruptcies.
That's right.
They did nothing wrong.
That's right.
There just wasn't enough money for them.
It's musical chairs, and
Yes,
somebody
exactly.
doesn't get to have a chair.
Yeah.
So recent bank failures. This is back in 2023, Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. I don't know if you remember when that happened. All deposits, this is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. They're big to tell you that all deposits up to $250,000 are insured. One of the things they don't tell you, though, like I met some people, you remember the SNL crisis back in the 90s? Well, I met some people that had $60,000 in a bank account that got tied up in that. And it was like 9 months after their money got seized, and they still hadn't got their money. Okay, so Janet Yellen has used the word backstop for eligible deposits, right? And eligible deposits are at systemic banks that can cause a failure of the entire system. So if you happen to have like Bank of America, then chances are you'll get your deposits covered and you'll get it back here pretty quick. But if you're like at, say, Comerica Bank or Regions Bank, matter of fact, you notice Citizens Bank is out of business, eh? Down there on the corner here in Ocean City, eh? Did you notice that?
No.
Yeah, the building's for sale.
Where's that?
That's right on the corner here in 9th and by the McDonald's.
Oh, yeah, that big building.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, that's Republic Bank. Yeah, that's Republic
that
Bank.
guy was, he used to work for TD Bank, and he went out on his own and basically overspent. And he, so that was not a real bank.
Well, they had branches all over the place, didn't they?
They only had about 30.
Yeah, well, that's a few. Anyways, so eligible deposits are at systemic banks that can cause a failure of the entire system. And if there's a major collapse, then if you're not at one of those banks, matter of fact, I don't keep any money in the bank. I keep as little as possible. I have cash and I keep it in cryptos. I have it in Coinbase as cryptos, and because you just don't know what's going to happen with the banks, and so anyways, and I don't keep much at Coinbase either. I keep because I have a Coinbase debit card, and we'll talk about that when we on the cryptocurrency weekend. Because I have a Coinbase credit debit card, and so I can spend my cryptos like I can anything else. Anyways, so Credit Suisse was down 7% on Friday, 24% for the week. This is back a few years ago because Credit Suisse actually failed. First Republic Bank, this is when Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank went down. So there was a major crisis in the banks. First Alliance was down 55%. Comerica was down 20%. East West Bancorp was down 15%. And Zions Bank was down 23%. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's interesting that I put Rumble there. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. And on Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. This is the front page of my channel. The subscribe button's already been clicked because otherwise it'll be red. And the bell, the arrow is pointing at the bell, and that way you get notifications. And it's a little bit different now. That was done back when my channel had 5,500 subscribers, and now there's close to 40,000. So Credit Suisse recently published that they own over $1 trillion of U.S. stocks fourth quarter of 2022. In 2013, the Swiss franc was very strong, making Swiss exports very expensive. Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank are both part of the Federal Reserve System. Did you know that? They're both Federal Reserve banks. They've been buying U.S. stocks and shorting gold. They've helped drive up stock prices that are caught in a massive short squeeze. So Credit Suisse had a $160 billion loss in the fourth quarter, told not to file an annual report for 2022. They sold to UBS for $3.2 billion on Sunday, called a shotgun wedding on CNBC. Swiss National Bank loaned them $100 million. UBS was down 14% after the deal was announced. Credit Suisse was down another 60% after the deal was announced. Jim Rickards talks about this kind of stuff. He's Admiral Rickards, retired. He was chief counsel at Long-Term Capital Management in the 90s, which is the first bailout. And so he knows how that stuff happens, and he talks about how the series of events, how usually when there's a big collapse like what happened in 2008, it usually starts about a year before, and then there's like dominoes, and one thing happens and it causes something else to happen, and it causes something else to happen, and then all of a sudden the world's falling apart. So I'd say watch Deutsche Bank. Credit Suisse bondholders were wiped out, $17 billion. Facebook was the high of 378, was then at 195. Amazon high of 195, then at 95. And so I'm curious to see. I know they went up after that, but they've gone down a lot recently because of the stock market's been going down. Matter of fact, there was an article on CNBC that I read that something like $3 trillion, or no, it was $1 trillion of equities in the nine big, like it's Amazon, Microsoft, Google. There was 9 stocks that were the big ones, and that there was like $1 trillion at one point that had been lost in market capitalization. Anyways, Facebook, Microsoft, Alphabet. Anyways, Credit Suisse is tied to the FTX cryptocurrency exchange that went bankrupt in the fall. Cash-strapped banks have borrowed $300 billion from the Federal Reserve. My contact information, my blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. You can all that stuff is on the business card there if you want one of those. My Facebook community page is deleted due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group called Sovereignty International is being deleted. Quite frankly, I haven't been to Facebook in months, maybe even years. I don't go there anymore. And what I have to do, if I did, is I gotta, in order to delete that private group on Facebook, I have to ban everybody off of it. Matter of fact, I had someone that offered to set up a bot. He's a computer nerd, so I might take him up on that. I got to contact him and see if he could do that. Because there's about 5 steps you have to do to ban everybody off of that group, and then you can delete the group. Otherwise, the group will stay there, and Facebook will be making money off it. You see what I'm saying? And so I want to delete the whole thing. I got to contact this friend of mine. He offered to do it, and he's a computer nerd. He said he could set up a bot that would just go ahead and do it all. So that'd be good. Anyways, so I have a free list group called Administrating Your Public Servants and a Google group called Administrating Your Public Servants. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International, Rumble, Sovereignty International, and Truth Social, Engineer Win. So Cliff High's data sets show that there's going to be a bond market crash. Matter of fact, if we, in that video, that sound thing that we listened to before, he said there's a bond market war going on between the U.S. Central Bank and the European Central Bank. And so it's going on right now. So we'll see how that all plays out. Bank failures would start with the regional banks. That's one of the things he said. And banks would be so desperate for money they would foreclose on mortgages that were not late. I haven't seen that, although I have seen commercial properties where they're refusing to refinance commercial properties. Like there was a building in St. Louis. Jim Willey was talking about it. It was a 40-story office building that was originally cost $400 million, and it recently sold for $1.5 million. So that's like, and Cliff High said that's going to happen, is where the banks are going to be stuck with these buildings because people can't. There was another story about a commercial building that was making a profit, was making all sorts of money, and it had 4 owners, and they couldn't arrange another mortgage. There was a balloon payment on this mortgage that was due, and they couldn't arrange a mortgage to replace the existing financing, and they were going to have to let the bank take it back. And it was a commercial building that was actually making money. And what Cliff High said is that he said he saw in his data sets how the banks will be stuck with these buildings that they can't sell for any price because of the fact that the commercial buildings in particular, okay, he said there'll be hotels that will be viable because people will still want to rent a hotel. He said, but the commercial buildings, everything's going to the internet. And he said that what will happen is that there'll be banks that'll be stuck with these big commercial buildings. And when you think of the maintenance and the taxes, that they can't sell it for even $1 because nobody wants to assume the liability of the maintenance and the taxes. And Cliff High actually talked about that, how he said that the millennials, their job will be is they'll put on coveralls and they'll go into these buildings and take all of anything that's usable out of them, like the copper plumbing and anything that's usable out of them, strip all that stuff out of there and then demolish the building and turn it into a parking lot. Because think about it, the property taxes as a parking lot are much less than with the building there. See what I'm saying?
Well, maybe that's another reason why they're trying to get rid of property taxes at the moment.
Right. Yeah, no joke. But corporations still have to pay property taxes. But they're talking about in Texas eliminating property taxes. And I think it's because of my lawsuit, because I sued them, and I sued the chief judge of the Supreme Court because he's involved in it. You see what I'm saying? And so I sued him, and the attorney general responded in the lawsuit, and they said that I can't sue him in his private capacity. And I said, yes, I can. And he's failing to regulate. His job was supposed to regulate the state bar, right? And the state bar was assaulting me with their bar members. And I filed almost 100 grievances. It was grievances against nearly 100 lawyers, right? Some of them more than once. And I said, and they dismissed them all as, what do they call them? They call them inquiries, right? They dismissed them all as inquiries. And he's chief judge of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is supposed to regulate the state bar. He's failing to do his job to regulate the state bar. And he resigned. He resigned, and I think it was because, and I know someone else that sued him, and he didn't resign, and they basically blew it off. You know what I mean? But I went, and that shows that I had a valid point because he resigned. Anyways,
well, there's another one as well. There's another lawsuit that's ongoing in Texas right now. It's a real estate developer who owned a large area of land that he developed, put properties on it, some commercial, some private properties, houses and things. And then he noticed that some of the properties he was paying the property taxes on, and the bill was going up and up and up, and it was a ridiculous amount, and the valuations of the properties. So he did some investigation on it and realized that there was fraud going on. They're supposed to follow gap.
I know about
rules.
that case. I know about that case.
Yeah, I can't remember where it is, but this one is going big time.
It's in
a lot of frightened people.
It's in Denton. The guy's in Denton, and there's a friend of mine that is a disbarred lawyer from Canada, and he's been in touch with this guy, and so he was telling me about it. And because this disbarred lawyer's got a tax issue too that he's fighting with over property taxes, but he doesn't have a commercial building. This guy was a commercial, and what he was doing was he would go ahead and pay the tax and then sue them, and they'd refund all the money because they don't follow their own procedures. They never follow their own procedures, and so you can get them on that. And so they're supposed to do. There's an appraisal district. They're supposed to do an appraisal. And it's supposed to be an official appraisal, like they appraise anything else. And they don't do it. They just make a wag. Matter of fact, what came out in this lawsuit was that they go to the school district, and the school district says, oh, we need this amount of money. So then they divide it amongst all the property owners, and that's the assessment. They don't even try and do it.
Doing it.
Yeah. It's a big scam, actually.
There's a lot of scared people because they're responsible. And they're definitely open to criminal lawsuits.
Yeah.
Or criminal prosecutions.
Right.
Lawsuits. But,
right.
Yeah. So that's ongoing, and of course, Florida. There was some mention about them removing property taxes too for private.
Yeah. I heard in Texas, they've made noises about getting rid of property taxes in Texas, This case, my case, is going to the Supreme Court. It's in the Court of Appeals right now, and I'll take it to the Supreme Court. That's not a problem. But this taxing authority, it's County of Montague, I haven't heard a peep out of them since. Okay, I haven't heard a peep. And I told them when you did that shit, I said, I've been to the Supreme Court 5 times. You know how much it costs to go to the Supreme Court? It doesn't cost me anything, but it costs. They say, and I don't know. They say it costs $2 million to go to the Supreme Court. And so now there's like about 30 people that are responding. And so in the Court of Appeals, I guarantee you it's going to be $50,000 if it's a nickel when they got to hire a lawyer. And each of those, there's about 6 different lawyers. There's the Attorney General. There's about 6 different lawyers, and they'll all have to transfer it to someone that does appellate case law. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And they'll have to, and then when it goes to the Supreme Court, and you want to mess with me, and so anyways.
Why would they get rid of property taxes?
Well, it's actually, if you read it's unconstitutional. The property taxes originated by an act of Congress in 1861. Okay? Matter of fact, I talk about it. I have a video called Property Taxes in Texas. And what happened is remember, the southern states walked out of Congress in 1861, and they ceased to have a quorum, and they couldn't conduct business. And so Lincoln ordered them back on the 15th of April of 1861 under executive authority, and they've been operating under executive authority ever since. So there's really no lawful Congress, number one. Number two, what happened is in August of 1861, they passed that act, and it was by apportionment. Okay? In other words, each state, based on the population, was assigned a certain amount of money to raise for property taxes. But it was for, if you read the original Texas tax code that was passed in 1876, okay, after the Civil War is over, Texas passed a tax code, and it said corporations had to pay the tax. And so corporations had to pay it. So what they did is they created a minor estate. Congress passed, and this is why it's unconstitutional. We're going to talk about that in later on when we talk about the unconstitutional, that minor estate being unconstitutional, because what they did in 1901 is they passed the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, and that brought in the minor estate, and that's what they're taxing, which comes under Article 3, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Commerce Clause. You see what I'm saying? And that's unconstitutional. Yes, Nelson.
Why in 1840 did the census, my people were paying taxes in Pennsylvania on their property?
I don't know. Why don't you ask them? I don't know. Well, all I can tell you is what happened in 1861, and that Congress passed an act about property taxes. I have no idea about that act. And it was probably a state act. It wasn't a federal act.
Okay, I'm just bringing. Well, when we say property taxes are unconstitutional, why? If so, I'm just hypothetical, or just asking for, just putting it out there that I know that there were people paying taxes on property farms in Pennsylvania in 1840.
I have no idea what the law said.
Okay.
Okay. I have no idea anything about any of that. Okay. All I know is what happened and what precipitated the taxes that I'm dealing with in Texas. I'd suggest that you go and do some research on, and I gotta use the restroom, so I'm gonna have to take a little pause. Right. But one thing about that tea in one, in and out the other. You know what I mean?
So
I wonder whether that was corporate related, though. Again, corporations.
No, it had to do with the census.
So were the taxes classed as property taxes, and were they assigned to private individuals or privately owned property?
My understanding is it was privately owned property.
They were more cognizant of the Constitution in those days than people are today, and that was clearly apparently unconstitutional. Applying direct taxation to private property.
I don't know. That's why I'm just mentioning that I saw. I'm like, why are we? Because I hear his claim that property taxes are unconstitutional. We know a state government needed money, right? Needed capital to run, to build, to pay for roads and for schools, and back then. And so I don't know that. I mean, and this is where the question as a Christian it comes in, where do we pay anything? Do we say absolutely not? Are we freeloaders, or are we going to pay tax willingly? We accept that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it completely voluntary? My friend Charlie claims it's completely voluntary from the beginning. So, and then right after he mentioned that, I was watching a Western. It was about El Paso, and El Paso. This was out west, though. It wasn't one of the original colonies, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
What was going on as far as the original colonies versus the West. And everybody had to agree to a tax to bring an aqueduct with water to El Paso. And they had to voluntarily all agree, we're going to do it. We're willing to pay.
So that was 1840?
In the 1840, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, farmland, houses, taxed. And it was part of it was when I was doing my ancestry research that I would see the taxation aspect. And it had how much they paid, how much it was assessed at. And maybe they weren't. Maybe it had to do with the apportionment. Maybe it wasn't. They were paying a tax. You know how he's talking about they have to be apportioned, the whole 16th Amendment thing.
Yeah.
So maybe they were getting, maybe what I read was that they were assessing the land for the apportionment aspect of how much the state had to pay. But then at that point, where does the state get the money to pay?
Yeah, that still has to come from the people usually.
Right.
Or from something that they do
right.
make money somehow. But they would just do that from excise taxation and commerce taxation.
Who's they?
The state. Because that's how they fund themselves.
Internally?
Well, no, it would still be external commerce as well. But when it becomes external, then it's federally regulated. Whereas internal commerce, the state is in full control of that.
Right. Commerce is interstate commerce. So commerce by itself could be within the state.
Yeah. But that would be state controlled.
Right.
Same as sales.
That wouldn't be federal.
All right.
Let's see. Okay, so let's keep moving here. So the banks would be so desperate for money, they would foreclose on mortgages that were not late. So think about that. That's like a major opportunity. I bet you could get, like you have a house. My daughter has a house in Arizona, and it's got a $60,000 mortgage. I don't know what the balance is. That's when, about 10 years ago, when she got the house. And I'll bet you that they would take 10 cents on the dollar. If she's not late on that, I bet you if they went and started to foreclose, I bet you could offer them $6,000, and I bet you they would take it and be glad to, you know what I mean? And
They might not now, but when they get into the thick of it, they might.
right.
Because then they'll be scrambling for every.
They'll be looking for money. But that's also going to be, there's going to be hyperinflation going on, tanks and armored front. This is what Cliff High's data set showed. There'd be hyperinflation, and there'd be tanks and armored vehicles in front of banks. And I haven't seen any of that yet, but I have seen banks in, like, what the banks do is they'll shut down branches in kind of rough neighborhoods. I've seen that happening. Matter of fact, you remember that Bank of America in that was north of it was I think it's Black Horse Pike or something like that. There was a Bank of America over there, and it's shut down now. It's out of business. They're closing down branches.
Hey, put this in your ear.
So, anyways, so the Trump arrest would create major chaos. It certainly did some of that. 3 to 5% of the normies wake up at some point. Stock market at 125,000. I haven't seen that yet. JSNP4 is a guy that I follow. He's training to be a shaman, and so he wants to help people. And he talks about, some of the stuff that he's getting dreams. He gets these dreams, and he talks about some of it. This is all made possible because of Roman civil law and the United Nations and the Vatican. 5th generation warfare. Right there is General Flynn's book on 5th generation warfare. And it's war for your mind. It's lies and disinformation. It's now. Matter of fact, let me just read something out of here that I like to read to people. Right now, someone somewhere is assessing you as a target and figuring out how to influence your thoughts, behavior, and actions. There are military manuals written on how to do it. This is not new, and with the proliferation of artificial intelligence and social media, it's never been faster or easier or more effective. Every click, every search, every hashtag, every response you type on a machine hooked to the internet is a factor that develops a matrix of how best to manipulate you worldwide. So, food for thought, eh? One of the things they talk about is what the military does to kill somebody. Remember, they talked about how those who the gods must destroy, they must first vilify, right? Well, first of all, they talk about how to make people kill people. And what they do is first they polarize people, then they tribalize people, then they dehumanize people, and then starts the killing. And there's a whole section in here on how they do that. And so who better would know than a 3-star general, right? He's a lieutenant general. Anyways, Cliff High said that recently that China had opened 2 colleges to train PLA officers. That's People's Liberation Army. 70,000 PLA officers graduate every quarter. So how big is the People's Liberation Army growing? Something's going on in China. China is preparing for a kinetic war. So check out my other videos. There's a Bankster Thieves playlist. There's a Roman cult playlist. There's bankrupt corporate so-called governments. Bar members 1 through 9. Do it yourself how not to volunteer for the selective service and the draft. Martial laws here. Do it yourself no income tax. Do it yourself free mail. Do it yourself kangaroo courts 1 through 30. Canada Border Pigs playlist. And bar members and their satanic connections playlist. The money powers prey upon the nation in times of peace and conspire against it in times of adversity. It is more despotic than a monarchy, more insolent than autocracy, and more selfish than bureaucracy. It denounces as public enemies all who question its methods or throw light upon its crimes. As a result of the war, corporations have been enthroned, an era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money powers of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until all wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. That's Abraham Lincoln. When injustice becomes law, then resistance becomes duty. Is there any wonder why Christ threw the Bankster thieves of his day out of the temple? Christ even called them thieves. This is all coming from the Roman cult. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. For when they were driven out of all their former holes, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs, to the use of the religious houses. That's use means usufruct. Thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, receiving the actual profits, while the season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. Isn't that convenient? And is still to this day that the Vatican runs all these courts. To be bound to account to assist use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. And that's Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. It's interesting to note that Tomlin's Law Dictionary doesn't have page numbers on it. And so that's the only way that I could show where to find it in there. You know what I mean? But so, yeah. I made these. I got a hold of these law dictionaries, and I had PDF Pro, so I was able to make them searchable, and then I do keyword searches in them, and it's amazing some of the stuff you come up with. It's amazing. That was one of them. The legal estate to be in necessity use, 31 Stat 1432, which is the code of law for the District of Columbia in 1901, and the absence for 7 years. 31 Stat 1230, presumption of death if any person shall leave his domicile without any knowledge of intention of changing the same, and shall not return or be heard from for 7 years from the time of his so leaving. Use is usufruct under Roman law. Usufruct is a type of a trust. Sestike use is a sestike trust. A citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the Public Charitable Trust, the Constructive Sestike Trust of U.S. Inc., under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. And that's a summary, so I need to take the quotation marks off of that, because it's 5 pages of congressional record. Has anybody ever seen the congressional record? It's 3 columns and real fine print. So it's a summary of 5 pages of the congressional record. You want me to put that back?
Yeah, I want to write that down and research.
I can send you the 5 pages if you want. I have them.
Well, we'll do both.
Well, remind me. Send me an email when you're ready for them.
Exactly. Hold on, let me just page 15641-15646, Congressional Record, June 13, 1967. Citizen of the United States, co-trustee, Sestike use. Right, and that's how they're basically enslaving the people.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is another summary that's not actually in that case. Every taxpayer is assessed a trust having sufficient interest in preventing the abuse of the trust to be recognized in the court field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. Matter of fact, I'll bet you some of these, like this one here, I'll bet you'll find it if you look up that case in LED, okay, the legal edition of the court, the U.S. reports. You see what I'm saying? Because there's a legal edition and there's U.S. reports, which I think U.S. reports are published by West Publishing. But the legal edition, I'm not sure who publishes that, but it's for lawyers. And so then they put in, you'll find stuff like that in there. Slater's protestations to the effect that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligation to pay income taxes. Unless the defendant can establish that he's not a citizen of the United States, the IRS possesses authority to attempt to determine his federal tax liability. There is an account with the Treasury in the name of every Sestake trust. If you turn up dead, the government collects the fake money in the account with the Treasury. At the end of World War II, the United States was the most heavily indebted governments on the planet. By the time of the 50s came around, less than 10 years, the United States was one of the least indebted nations on the planet. The Roman cult wants you dead. Individual means a natural person. This is at 31 CFR 363.6. Minor means an individual under the age of 18 years. The term minor is also used to refer to an individual who's attained the age of 18 years but has not yet taken control of the securities contained in his or her minor account. A court means a court of law with jurisdiction over the parties and the subject matter. And the subject matter jurisdiction is the best way to defeat any of this stuff.
My understanding when I go into court is it's my court.
So how's that worked out for you?
It's working out great. It took a long time to come to the understanding and to train them, because if they're willing to commit crimes using their guns, it doesn't matter. I mean, what would happen right now if they chose to take you away? It would be their court until such time as our court trumps their court. And so the flag without the gold fringe is why I think I'm now successful. Even though there's a warrant for the arrest of the name, they're leaving me alone because I have established it's my court.
Well, I hope so. I know Charlie used to go in there and say, I'm here from a foreign jurisdiction.
And through that process, there's the concept that it's his court. And he's the highest court, he's the highest law in that court. And that causes the administrator to actually become a judge, because he has to now.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. But the mechanics of how you do it, and I want to see him recognize that. But it's entirely possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. So we'll see.
And it has to do with, we hear about in civics class, history class, the courts of France, the court of England, the court of France, the court of Spain. When we became kings, princes, essentially here, that's where the common law, it's my court. Now, if you damage me, my court goes to your court and says, we have to appear for trial by jury. We each have a court. As a man, as a king. So
sovereign without subjects, as I mentioned.
Exactly. So when it says, okay, so the reason I brought this up is read that again. Court means
a court of law with jurisdiction over the parties and the subject matter.
So when I go into court, when you go into court, you're telling them it's your court. It's a court of law with jurisdiction over the parties and the subject matter. You're saying they don't have subject matter jurisdiction, and it's Glenn's court telling the other court that's the case. You're claiming it's your jurisdiction, essentially.
I don't disagree with you, but
I'm not
the
asking
question
you
is there a bunch of pirates, and how do you get them to?
I concur. And so through that, we have to say, okay, the original Constitution, all the things we've been discussing.
Right.
So I just wanted to mention that
What's there be light? You can see for miles.
that the concept of it being my court is what has helped me overcome
Well,
their presumption.
so far, let's see if it continues. I don't want to be put out negative vibes, and so I hope so. I like the idea, and
that's why I brought it up, just to give everyone who's listening that
right,
if in fact it's because I know, Glenn, you like the common law court aspect.
absolutely,
right? And so with Charlie, and he died before he tested this last theory, which was this: when he sues someone in this current system, and they both parties go before the administrator, because he comes from the foreign jurisdiction of as the United States of America, Charlie claimed that when he establishes himself as the United States of America and the other party brings in a bar member, that by itself causes the administrator to become a judge, and that judge, in order to fulfill his oath, must grant Charlie his demand by virtue of Charlie, is the one with jurisdiction over the parties and subject matter at that moment. That was his case. That was his approach.
yeah. I haven't seen that, but it'll be interesting. I hope so. I mean, the question is, and the proof of being the pudding when you carry a lawful flag into that court, and if they bow down to it, then that's going to be a home run.
And if not, then at that point we report them to the Adjutant General of the state, because the Adjutant General, in my mind, is responsible.
I guess we'll see.
For the militia, for we the people of the state, because the state, the original de jure state, New Jersey or PA, wherever, the original de jure state they now are violating the original Constitution, and it's up to the Adjutant General through the militia, who's a representative of the army.
Right. It's an insurrection is what it is.
Exactly. And the Holy Spirit, right. So the Spirit's testifying I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
So I'm just sharing this so that I've enjoyed going through the mental process of why and how.
Right.
And through that, now I had to go to jail to prove my point.
Right.
And I was in a municipal setting at a city council meeting, and I declared there was a warrant out for my arrest. And that warrant was in fact still there. All the cops knew the warrant existed, but I forced them to execute the warrant, the fake warrant.
By bringing it up.
By bringing it up in public. And then it turned out that now there's another warrant issued for even more bail, but now the local police refuse to currently. We'll see, because we're going to find out.
And so what do? I want to see the warrant, and I'll be happy to go with you peacefully if it's a lawful warrant, and you show me the warrant. Otherwise, I have a right to resist. And if they're doing their job, then what they'll do is and you tell them it's color of law. And they'll say, well, we just wanted to make you aware of it. Right, go on their way.
Right. So those cops, when they pulled you over, you were holding court on the side of the road.
Right.
Was Charlie's point.
Right.
It was your court.
Right.
And you were the highest law with jurisdiction over the parties.
Right.
And that was his point.
Right. Well, so again, part of it's getting them trained. Entity means any owner of a Treasury direct account that's not an individual. Entity is a sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, limited liability company, or professional limited liability company, trust, the estate of a decedent, or the estate of a living person, such as an incompetent or a minor. So corporations have no rights. A corporation is property. All corporations are agents of the government and subject to all constitutional restrictions. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property of the United States, property belonging to the United States. That's Article 4, Section 2. And this is in Canada. It says owned is subject to the regulations. That's the Canadian Ownership and Control Determination Act. Every corporation, for all its purposes, is an agency of the bitch. That's another in Canada. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written and supported by unquestionable authorities and is very particular and very horrible. The Jesuit order's restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII is indeed a step towards darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuit. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is the Society of Ignatius de Loyola. John Adams, second President of the United States. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley, Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. And this is Roman Conquest, 24th of September, 2015. That red text here is pointing at things, but it's kind of hard to read. So I have it right here. In the top left-hand corner, it says Roman Achaea military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. So it's pointing at this military staff right here. And that's the text right here, pointing at that military staff right here.
Question.
Yes.
It's true, the United States, in up to 10 square miles, let's say it just belongs to the Vatican for the sake of original, even the way we let them have it in order to do whatever we did. That doesn't negate the fact that we're not conquered, even if that's there today.
I know, that's District of Columbia.
So your point is that you're a free man and you're not conquered, so people tend to think that the America is conquered because of that Roman.
Just D.C.
Exactly. So I just wanted to.
I'm not disputing that,
just bring
but people need to understand this is all coming from the Roman cult.
Okay, right. I got you. So I just.
That's what I said. Is it's all coming from the Roman cult.
Right, but to me there tends to be a feeling of defeat.
I don't know. You might get that feeling, but I don't.
Are we defeated?
Matter of fact, if you have knowledge about what's going on, then it's easily defeated. You defeat them.
Correct. So
so that's the purpose of me doing this, is to educate people about what's going on.
Thank you.
So this text right here is pointing at this guy right here, which is right here, devout Roman Catholic, honorary degree from Jesuit Scranton University. Okay, and that's actually pointing at Joe Biden. And then this text right here says Roman bundle of rods bound to a weapon, symbolizing subservient under the rule of a single man. So it's pointing at these Roman fascia right here. That's what that text says. And then devout Roman Catholic, trained by Jesuits, installed the first Jesuit chaplain to the house. That's this text right here. And they're pointing at Boner or whatever his name is. There was speaker at the time. And in fact, I could probably get I've got other videos that I have a much clearer picture of the speaker's podium of the U.S. House of Representatives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There we go. There's a nice clear picture. Copy image. Okay. So there you see that staff right there and the fascists. Now, they had the National Guard in D.C. after Trump lost that election, or after they stole that election. And so that could have been us seizing D.C. back from the Vatican. But I don't know, and I haven't seen any recent pictures of the speaker's podium and see if that stuff is still there.
That'd be a good thing to do.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah,
Interesting to see the latest.
right.
They have shown me some pictures as well, but I didn't pay attention to what was there.
Right. Just checking the comments on YouTube. Right now, I've got 32 viewers, and I'm getting some good connection, so that's good.
So the D.C. is a foreign jurisdiction and always has been since it was
That's
created.
true.
So that's why we're free outside of D.C.
Well, but the government has been seized, the federal government, and that's the reason. It used to be that when people came here and they immigrated, they were given an opportunity. They had a questionnaire. Do you want to become a U.S. citizen or do you want to become a state citizen?
Right.
And most people didn't have any idea what it meant to be a U.S. citizen. So, I want to be a U.S. citizen. They could have chosen to be a state citizen, but now they don't give you that opportunity because, again, it's all deceptive. They're owned by Satanists. They lie and cheat and steal, and except that Donald Trump is there, and I think that's going to change everything.
And they only bring us through the maritime aspect of the Cestacate Trust, meaning a citizen, someone who becomes a, quote, citizen of the United States.
Yeah.
They're basically only given the option of a maritime.
Yeah. It goes to presumption again.
Right.
Why do you think Donald Trump's first international trip includes the Roman cult on the itinerary? Why do you think the Pope looks so angry in his pictures with Donald Trump? This is Obama with the pimp, and he's sitting there laughing and chuckling, and Trump, and he's not too happy there, is he? He knows justice is coming. Yeah. Anyways. After massacring the entire town of the population of the Italian town of Palestina, Boniface VIII indulged in menages with a married woman and her daughter and became renowned through Rome as a shameless pedophile. He famously declared that having sex with young boys was no more a sin than rubbing one's hand against the other. The poet Dante reserved a place for him in the eighth circle of hell. So these are the popes. 37 of his own clergy members witnessed and professed against John the 23rd on charges of fornication, adultery, incest, sodomy, simony, theft, and murder. He also had a harem of mistresses in Boulogne, numbering 200, consisting mostly, if not entirely, of nuns. So this is the popes. Pope Francis commits idolatry at the feet of a Mary statue. He's kissing the feet of this Mary statue. They're Satanists. That's what they are. That's why he's got to wear white. Makes everybody think, oh, he's so pure.
Now that picture with the Roman, like there's a Senate house and there's a House of Representatives chamber. There's two chambers, I would think. So which chamber was that? Do we know?
The House of Representatives.
That was the House of Representatives. Okay.
Yep. The Vatican's New World Order. Herman Van Rompuy, the president of the European Council, stated recently, "We are all Jesuits." He was referring to those prominent European leaders with whom he is developing the Roman Catholic architecture for the future Europe. It creates unbreakable ties, so there is a Jesuits International. Papal Bull Dum Diversus. Pope Nicholas V issued the Papal Bull Dum Diversus on 18th of June, 1452. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens, Muslims, and pagans, and any other unbelievers to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. The same pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5th, 1455, to the same Alfonso as a follow-up to the Dum Diversus. It extended to the Catholic nations of Europe dominion over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery. Along with sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands, it encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and the New World. We weighing all and singular the premises with due mediation, and noting that since we had formerly by other letters of ours granted among other things free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit, by having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the aforesaid Enfant, justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed and doth possess these islands, lands, harbors, seas, and they do of right belong and pretend to the said King Alfonso and his successors. In 1493, Alexander VI issued the bull Intercerrera, stating that Christian nation did not have the right to establish dominion over lands previously dominated by another Christian nation, thus establishing the law of nations. That's where the law of nations got started.
I noticed as well that you told about those papal bulls were issued 1452 and 1455, talking about the New World. It wasn't discovered until 1492.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Together, the Dum Diversus, the Roman Pontifex, and the Intercerrera came to serve as the basis and justification for the doctrine of discovery, the global slave trade of the 15th and 16th centuries in the age of imperialism. From 1203 to 1805, 50 million Christians died suffering at the hands of Rome because they believed in Christ alone. They died through Europe, especially Spain. They saw all but Christ as vain. He who suffering by his death for men to save them from their unlawful sin, 600 years of martyred saints, what history cannot erase, with iron heel and iron hand the Roman popes rule the land. The Rothschilds have been part of the Jesuit order since way before 1776. Maltese cross indicates membership and allegiance to the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a Masonic order created in 1099 by direct descendants of Roman emperors, of which the Jesuit order is a brand. The Roman cult wants you dead. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Well, you know, I hate to say it, but he's not Christian. So where does he get authority to make those kinds of statements? The Vatican's Holocaust, a sensational account of the most horrifying religious massacre in the 20th century by Avril Manhattan, Knight of Malta, which is kind of interesting. Avril Manhattan was the world's foremost authority on Roman Catholicism and politics. A resident of London during World War II, he operated a radio station called Radio Freedom, broadcasting to occupied Europe. He was the author of over 20 books, including the bestseller The Vatican and World Politics, twice Book of the Month, and going through 57 editions. He was a Great Britain who risked his life daily to expose some of the darkest secrets of the papacy. His books were #1 on the Forbidden Index for the past 50 years. Editors note this issue in 1986. In 2006, the record is now 70 years on the Forbidden Book list. Preface to the American edition. The Vatican's Holocaust is not a misnomer, an accusation, and even less a speculation. It is an historical fact. Rabid nationalism and religious dogmatism were his two main ingredients. During the existence of Croatia as an independent Catholic state, over 700,000 men, women, and children perished. Many were executed, tortured, died of starvation, buried alive, or were burned to death. Hundreds were forced to become Catholic. Catholic padres ran concentration camps. Catholic priests were officers of the military corps, which committed such atrocities. 700,000 in a total population of a few million proportionally would be as if 1/3 of the USA population had been exterminated by a Catholic militia. What has been gathered in this book will vindicate the veracity of these facts. Dates, names, places, as well as photos are there to prove them. They should have become known to the American public. They should become known to the American public, not to foster vindictiveness, but to warn them of the damage which racialism and sectarianism, when allied with religious intolerance, can bring to any contemporary nation, whether in Europe or in the New World. This work should be assessed without prejudice as a lesson, but even more vital as a warning for the future of the Americans, beginning with that of the USA. Avril, Manhattan, 1986. An armed Serbia could have easily prevented this Holocaust. Thank God for the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right to bear arms. Freedom of religion and an armed citizenry go hand in hand, and the only guarantees that this won't happen in the U.S. Editor's note, it is the Vatican's one world government that doesn't want you to have the right to own arms or to use any means to defend yourself. And notice the pimp doesn't want you to have arms.
And the Vatican's pro-life.
Sorry?
And the Vatican's pro-life.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's only when it's convenient, I guess. The Roman cult wants you dead. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Yeah, I'll bet. This was written in 1989. The New World Order says homosexual marriages will be legalized. Parents will be allowed to raise their children. The state will. Parents will not be allowed to raise their children. That's why they're stealing people's kids all the time. The state will. All women will be employed by the state and not allowed to be homemakers. Divorce will become exceedingly easy, and monogamous marriages will be slowly phased out. The workplace, the government will become the owner of all the factories of production. The private ownership of property will be outlawed. Religion will be outlawed, and believers will be either eliminated or imprisoned. There will be a new religion, the worship of man and his mind. All will believe in the new religion. And that's New World Order by Ralph Epperson, 1989.
Or planks of communism.
Right.
Sounds like the tribulation.
Does. Jewish Encyclopedia. Rothschilds are guardians of the papal treasure. 1901 to 1906, volume 2, page 497. Up here it says, the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds by establishing a banking concern which should essentially be Catholic. Meanwhile, the nationalist and reactionary parties of France desired to counterbalance the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds by establishing a banking concern which would be essentially Catholic. And then it goes on and says it is a somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds that at the present time, the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure. So,
Vatican Bank, I guess.
Well, I guess, yeah, the Rothschilds, yeah, could be, yeah. Yeah. Mugga Bank, Bank of the Future. When the government has all the guns. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Just following orders. I was just following orders is never a valid excuse or justification for immoral criminal behavior, and this lame attempt to abdicate personal responsibility should never be accepted as a valid excuse for such behavior. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Every great injustice has been at the hands of someone just following orders. Some people be like, I need more proof, I can't see it. Law-abiding citizens and brave soldiers just doing their job. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Those who make their fortunes from you being sick are the same people who tell you what you will make you well. Some more law-abiding citizens. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Taxes were not raised to carry on wars. Wars were raised to carry on taxes. Some more law-abiding citizens. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. The war is not meant to be won, it's meant to be continuous. Some more law-abiding citizens. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. We had grasped a great deal that it was not rifles, not tanks, not atom bombs that created power, nor upon them that power rested. Power depended upon public obedience, upon a willingness to submit. And that's Vladimir Bukovsky, To Build a Castle, My Life as a Dissenter. Some people like, I need more proof, I can't see it. Why does the government want to ban semi-automatic rifles? Because they know you won't get into boxcars willingly. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. China established gun control in 1935. From 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. The illusion of free choice. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. The only reason for disarming the people is to make them powerless against tyranny. We will take your guns because we have made an agreement to do so, called freedom from war. The United States is third in murders throughout the world. If you remove number 1, Chicago, number 2, Detroit, number 3, Washington, D.C., number 4, St. Louis, and number 5, New Orleans, the United States is then 189th out of 193 countries in the entire world. P.S. All 5 cities have strict gun control laws, and they're run by Democrats. All deposits in a bank account are unsecured loans to the bank. Goldman Sachs used their money to finance the Somali pirates. Did you know that? You remember the Somali pirates that they went and captured off the coast of Somalia because they were capturing ships and demanding a ransom? Well, Somali pirates came back to New York and they put them on trial. It came out that Goldman Sachs owned them. Capturing some shipping and demanding ransoms. How much of the terrorism in the world is financed by banksters with your money? Think about it. When you make a deposit into a bank account, you're literally financing your own destruction. The banksters are preparing to crash the system and steal your deposits. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. When the interest owed on money rises in relation to the amount of currency issued, you have an ever-increasing debt vacuum that can never be repaid. This is called a pyramid scheme run by the private corporation known as the Federal Reserve. The 2008 crash was planned and orchestrated. See Bankster, Thieves 2 and 3 videos. The subprime crisis was planned and orchestrated. See Bankster, Thieves 2 and 3 videos. Millions of people are homeless because the banksters planned it that way. Banks do not loan money. See Bankster, Thieves 2 and 3 videos. They don't. They don't loan money. There's no such thing as a bank loan. That's what my videos talk about. The banksters were bailed out with $700 billion, and they used it to pay bonuses to their employees to set up this collapse. This is the 1988 Economist magazine cover predicts the collapse and a new world currency by 2018. Obviously, it didn't happen, but it doesn't mean they haven't stopped trying. This is Deutsche Bank, systemic risk among GSIBs, and I'm not sure what GSIB stands for, but there's this Deutsche Bank, and they're all doing, trying to rig the prices of gold and silver. Russia's treasury holdings, this was up till April of 2018. That's U.S. Treasury holdings, right? In other words, they're selling off, or it did sell them off. They don't have any anymore. And they've been accumulating gold, okay? So this was 2018. The gold reserves of the Russian central bank have been going up too. Turkey, the central bank, has also sold nearly half of its U.S. Treasury holdings since November. It held almost $62 billion 5 months ago and now holds only 38. So that was in 2018. Norway, the country's reduced its share of U.S. debt by a whopping 40% since last September. Japan, the second largest holder of U.S. Treasury holdings, the country had cut holdings by $12.3 billion in April to $101.03 trillion. China, the largest owner of U.S. Treasury holdings, it's also sold $5.8 billion worth in April to $1.18 trillion. Ireland and UK and Switzerland, all these countries also sold U.S. debt in April. China.
The question is, who did they sell it to?
Yeah.
It was actually the Federal Reserve who ended up having.
A lot of times that's what happens. Is they're supposed to be, actually, the Federal Reserve is the buyer of last resort. Jim Willett talks about that in his videos, is that they have to buy it. If nobody else wants it, they have to buy it. And what happens is, I think sometimes at least, I don't know if it's all the time, but they might even get it at a discount. In other words, they'll say, well, we don't really want it, but we'll give you 10 cents on the dollar. Not 10 cents, but maybe 85 cents even. You see what I'm saying? And that was back to Silicon Valley Bank. What happened, the reason that failure happened is because at the time, remember, the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates. Okay, this was 2013. And so what was happening was T-bills. Silicon Valley Bank, Jim Rickards talks about that in his videos. He says that all derivatives have to be backed up by T-bills, okay? And it's a small percentage, but it's still a percentage that has to be backed up by T-bills. And so what happened, Silicon Valley Bank had T-bills to back up their derivatives. And what happened was that the T-bills, because interest rates were going up, right? Think about how the bond market works. Interest rates go up, that's the yield. The yield goes up, the price goes down. And so interest rates were going up. Those T-bills were only worth, 85 cents on the dollar. And so their balance sheet was upside down. That's the reason they had to go bankrupt, because of that. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, they didn't diversify enough. They just bought T-bills.
Right.
And then because that one asset declined, then everything declined.
So then what happened is the Federal Reserve announced that they would guarantee all T-bills at par, okay, which means at 100% of the value. And so then that's why it didn't cause more bank failures, okay, because the bank failures pretty well stopped at that point. You see what I'm saying? Because the Federal Reserve said they would guarantee them at par. And so that stopped the stampede. Anyways, China continues to get rid of U.S. treasuries. Putin went kicking and screaming into the Ukraine war. Now, you remember, for years, Putin was saying, you can't do this. This is going to cause a war. And people they went ahead and did it anyways, right? So he was kicking and screaming all the way to the Ukraine war. He really didn't want to do that. Trade wars, which are going on right now. China attacked us in the 2020 election with the COVID pandemic. When any country goes to war, all treaties and contracts are terminated. I don't know if you know that or not, but that's what happens. All the treaties go out the window.
I think the same thing happened to Russia and Putin as happened with Hitler and Poland in the Second World War.
Right.
The same cause that started the Second World War was attempted to be started with the Russian and Ukraine situation.
Right. So, okay, I got that. Japanese former prime minister was assassinated in 2022. Nobody shows up for treasury auctions. I don't know if you know that, but they're having treasury auctions and nobody's showing up. And what happens is that all banks are required to bid on treasuries. Okay, that's part of being part of the Federal Reserve System. So even like Deutsche Bank, because it's a Federal Reserve Bank, it's required to bid on U.S. treasuries. And so what happens is, because the treasuries will make their balance sheet look bad, what they do is they immediately turn around and sell them and it's the Federal Reserve that has to buy them. So the Federal Reserve has bought up the Exchange Stabilization Fund. That's it. The Exchange Stabilization Fund buys them too. And so, January 2023, Congress refused to raise the debt ceiling. Then Biden, remember, he eliminated the debt ceiling. He just said, well, we can spend, just like anything we wanted. And they're just spending it like mad. Cloward Piven strategy for communist takeover. I don't know if you're aware of this one. So there's a 3-step strategy. Number 1 is open the border and allow millions of people into the country. Number 2 is spend money like mad to destroy the dollar. And number 3, make war on ordinary patriotic Americans like us, basically. Take reprisals against us. And I can show you all sorts of stuff they've been done with me for sure. Matter of fact, there's going to be a lawsuit coming. There's a judge actually in Texas that sent me an order of deficiency and told me I had to file a lawsuit. But I can only do one lawsuit at a time. There's too much. The lawsuits take up a lot of your time, let me tell you. So most, not all cryptocurrencies are outside the bankster control. The blockchain's a trustless system. That's the nice thing about the blockchain. Most, but not all cryptocurrencies are impossible to counterfeit. But not all cryptocurrencies circumvent the bankster thieves. Bankster money is fraud, corruption, taxes, and financing your own destruction. So, my attitude is quit dealing with the bankster thieves, okay? That's my personal opinion. And quit financing your own destruction. That's, again, my own personal opinion. The Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. For those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. This is the meme that Trump put out before his first indictment. Because he said I was going to go after the deep state when I get back into office, right? So when freedom and liberty are at stake, your silence isn't golden, it's yellow. And that's the end of this one. So anyways, now what I do with these is I save them as a PDF. And then ultimately it'll get uploaded to my website.
Which one is this entitled as?
That one's Bankster Thieves 5.
And what was yesterday's?
That one was Attorneys 9. Yeah. So the important thing is that, let me see here. The important thing, what time is it anyways?
12:20.
Yeah, 12:20.
Right, 12:20. Do we want to keep going? Or do we want to take a lunch break?
Oh, I said I'm going to go do some of this work for myself this weekend.
Oh, okay.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Glenn.
All right. Well, I'm glad you liked it. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the live stream, and I'll start another one. So thanks everybody on YouTube for watching. We're going to talk about the notice of constitutional challenge is going to be what we're going to talk about next. But we're debating about whether we're going to have a lunch first. So we'll see what happens. But right now I'm going to end the live stream. Thanks for watching, everybody on YouTube.